This episode of Moist Meter was brought to you by Crunchyroll.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Tower of God, the new Crunchyroll original, and it is an absolute banger. I knew nothing about this going into it. It had a lot of hype surrounding it, but I just approached it limp-dickedly like, yeah, I'll turn it on. Maybe I'll like it. Maybe it'll be alright. And I fucking loved it. I absolutely loved it. By episode 3, I was hooked. It is a super unique show, not only in its concept, but in its presentation as well. The visuals are unlike anything I've seen before. It's like they took a fucking sketchbook and just animated that directly without like translating it to any other medium. It is stunning. I was a bit lukewarm on it initially because I was like, wow, this is different, you know. I don't know if I like different yet. And then by the end of it, I was like, shit, maybe I'm gonna put some fingers in my butthole just to experience more different shit because I fucking loved it. It really grew on me. And another thing about this show that just blew my tits off was the soundtrack. The soundtrack was so goddamn beautiful, I went out of my way to download most of it. And I had never done that for an anime before, except for Vinland Saga's first intro song, which was Survive Said the Prophet. That was the only other time. This one was so good, and I was not expecting anything like that. It has the most beautiful music that almost reminds me of the soundtrack to the first Nier game for the Xbox 360. Not Nier Automata, the one that came before it, the one that nobody fucking knows about and got spit on at the time of its release. That game had an incredible soundtrack, and it reminds me of a few of the songs in this show. It's just so good. So now getting into what the show is actually focused on, which is its story and its characters. I initially thought this was just going to be mainly action. You know, you'll have some blood and cum flying all over the place during some high-octane battles, but that's not what you get with Tower of God, and you shouldn't expect it. The show is much more focused on telling you a very interesting story with really interesting characters that all have very unique relationships and pasts with each other as well. It's hard to explain because I'm trying not to spoil anything because I think it's best to go into Tower of God totally blind and oblivious to it if you haven't already read it, because I think that was just the optimal experience. But in a nutshell, the story I think is super interesting. As the show continues for the 13 episodes that it has, you're getting more questions than answers. You're constantly getting new information that completely changes your perspective on what the tower could even be about. You know, what's at the top of the tower, what is even the purpose, what do these characters want out of it, and it's just constantly feeding you all kinds of interesting mysteries that have you thinking. And the characters are all very well written. I think all the characters are likable, and I think everything from like a character perspective and writing perspective is extremely tight. There wasn't any time where I was like rolling my eyes at any cliches or anything. I thought it was all just really well executed. I think the romance between Bam and Rachel is well explored with a lot of, you know, tragedy sprinkled in there. It's good. What I'm saying is pretty much everything they did with the narrative in the writing department, they fucking crushed it. They absolutely crushed it. And this isn't to say that there isn't action, because there is. There is scenes of action, and it is well animated and decent action, but it's nothing super special. In fact, I'd almost say the action in here is probably the weakest part of Tower of God. Every action scene's over almost instantly. You'll have two characters, sometimes more than two characters, engage in a conflict that's approximately like one move using some magical power, or one or two attacks that either get blocked or connect, and that's pretty much where it ends. Even when you have like a super powerful person squaring off against another super powerful person, it's pretty much just a one-sided slaughter where one of the people is just going to dodge everything and then just beat the shit out of the other person with a couple blows. So I don't think the action in the show is overly great. It's still nice. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't think it's like a very big highlight of Tower of God. I think Tower of God really shines when it's telling you this story, and it's giving you background on these characters, and you're watching these characters interact with each other, and you're learning everyone's motive for even being at the tower. I think that's where the show's its strongest. It's actually pretty hard to talk about Tower of God because there is so many things that could be considered a spoiler about it, and I don't want to spoil anything at all. So I think the main thing you should know about the show is that the goal for every character is to climb this tower where if you reach the top of the tower, you become God. Everyone has their own reasons, and a whole bunch of shit happens to get there, a whole bunch of tests and everything, and it's fucking spectacular. Plugging Tower of God into the Moist Meter, I'm giving this bad boy a 90%. I think this is an extremely strong show. I think the only people that would really be disappointed with it are those that are used to like an 8-figure budget all spent on a single fight scene animated over the course of a year that lasts like 5 minutes on screen. That you're not going to get that level of like action scene craziness in Tower of God, so you probably will be a little let down in that department. But everything it lacks in that respect, it makes up for hugely in every other department about the show. I think it is really, really good, and I enjoyed the shit out of it. As I'm sure many of you know by now, I watch the vast majority of my anime on Crunchyroll. It just has a huge catalog and pretty much has every show I could even think of, or any show that I'm even moderately interested in, I can find on Crunchyroll easily. It's just a great service. If you're interested in checking out Crunchyroll, if you're a fan of anime, or if you want to check out Tower of God, which is a Crunchyroll original, and like I said in the Moist Meter, it absolutely banged, you can get Crunchyroll ad-free for 14 days by clicking the link in the description or going to crunchyroll.com/penguinz0. You can get every new episode an hour after its broadcast, going right to Crunchyroll, professionally subtitled, 1080p, beautiful quality. You never have to worry about being low quality or anything. It's always going to be top notch on Crunchyroll, so I highly recommend the service. So again, if you're interested for 14 days ad-free, you can click the link in the description. That's it. See ya.